All right, the playoff push is here, and your quarterback could be the reason that you move on or go home. Let's get into the Week 14 quarterback rankings. What's up, Headliner Nation? My name is Brad, the Rankings King, and before we dive into this week's rankings, just a reminder that these are the consensus rankings from the Headliners team. And for more detailed analysis, make sure to check out the start-sit videos already posted on the channel this week. If you want even more breakdowns each week, join the Fantasy Headliners community by hitting that join button below, and that's going to get you access to extra rankings like flex, kicker, defense, and a spot inside of our Discord. All right, we're wasting no time this week. We're jumping right into the rankings. In Tier 1, we've got Josh Allen, Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, and Matthew Stafford. Topping the list at number 1, we have Josh Allen, and Allen hasn't had over 18 fantasy points in back-to-back games, but he's still the QB1 in fantasy, and now he gets a matchup against Cincy, who allows the 5th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, and hopefully this turns out to be a shootout against Joe Burrow. At number 2, we've got Dak Prescott, and Dak continues to ball out. He's got 21 plus fantasy points in 7 of his last 9 games, and now goes up against the Detroit defense that allows the 4th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. At number 3, we have Jalen Hurts, and it hasn't been pretty at times, but Hurts has been one of the most consistent quarterbacks all season long. Now he gets the Chargers, who haven't allowed over 200 yards passing since week 7, so it's a good thing that he can score his points in other ways. At number 4, we have Matthew Stafford, and Stafford has only 2 games all season where he failed to throw for multiple touchdown passes. He's currently on pace for a career high in passing touchdowns, and in a decent matchup against Arizona, he'll be looking to throw more. All right, so just those 4 guys in Tier 1. And before we head into the next tier, I want to make sure that you're all set up on Underdog. And you already know that we've been crushing those player pick-ems on Underdog this year. So what are you waiting for? Head over to Underdog Fantasy or download the app. Create a new account using the referral code HEADLINERS when you do so. Then just make your initial deposit and come join a contest. And if you sign up with that promo code, again, it's HEADLINERS, you'll get access to all of the promos that Underdog offers weekly. And check this out, when you play your first $5, they're going to give you $100 in bonus funds. So you play 5, you get 100. It's that easy. And don't forget, Jake is also going to be breaking down the best picks weekly in our show on Fridays. So links to join are in the description, and we look forward to playing with you this week. All right, let's turn the page to Tier 2. And we've got Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, Jacoby Brissett, Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence, Daniel Jones, and Bo Nix. At number 5, we have Joe Burrow, and we'd love to see the Burrow return last week and immediately throw for 250 yards and 2 touchdowns. We're hoping that T. Higgins returns from his concussion because this matchup against Buffalo will not be easy. They allow the 2nd fewest fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. At number 6, we have Patrick Mahomes, and Mahomes is all the way up to QB2 on the season, but now he'll get his toughest matchup of the year against Houston, who's been absolutely shutting down quarterbacks all season long, allowing less than 13 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. At number 7, we have Jared Goff, and Goff continues to be a Verge top 12 quarterback each and every week. And we don't love the game on Thursday, and we don't love the chance that he might be without St. Brown. The matchup is great against Dallas, but there are some worries here this week. At number 8, we have Baker Mayfield, and there's a chance that Mike Evans could return to practice this week, but the likelihood of him actually playing is pretty slim. 4 of Baker's last 5 games have resulted in less than 200 yards passing, and New Orleans is a slightly above average pass defense. At number 9, we have Lamar Jackson, and if you Google the word struggle, a picture of Lamar Jackson pops up. He's had less than 8 points in 3 straight, and I would love to say that this is a great matchup against Pittsburgh, but it's Lamar's play that led to the recent struggles and not the matchups. At number 10, we've got Jacoby Brissett, and Brissett has now gone 7 straight games with scoring at least 18 fantasy points. He's had 40 pass attempts in 4 straight, and if Bryce Young could find success against this Rams defense, so can Jacoby Brissett. At number 11, we have Jordan Love, and Love is coming off of one of his best games of the year last week against Detroit, where he threw for 4 touchdowns. Now he'll come into week 14 with the matchup against Chicago, who allows the 8th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. At number 12, we have Trevor Lawrence, and he's the current QB 12 overall, and he's had back-to-back games with over 20 fantasy points with the acquisition of Jacoby Myers and the return of Britton Strange. It's given him a big boost. Now he'll face Indy, who will actually be without Sauce Gardner. At number 13, we have Daniel Jones, and with the leg injury, we haven't seen much rushing lately, but we have seen him throw for multiple touchdowns in back-to-back tough matchups against Kansas City and Houston. Now he finally gets a great matchup against the Jags, who allow over 19 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. At number 14, we have Bo Nix, and it may not feel like it, but Bo Nix is currently the QB 10 on the year. He bounced back with a solid game against Washington in Week 13, and now he gets a matchup against an average Vegas pass defense. All right, that's it for a loaded Tier 2. Now let's turn the page to Tier 3. We've got Caleb Williams, Sam Darnold, CJ Stroud, Tyler Shuck, Tua Tagovailoa, and Justin Herbert. At number 15, we've got Caleb Williams, and he's been really inconsistent lately. His rushing production has taken a hit as of late, and he only has 5 passing touchdowns over the last month. And he'll get one of his most difficult matchups that he's had in a while against Green Bay. At 16, we have Sam Darnold, and Darnold went from being one of the safest quarterbacks the first 6 weeks to one of the most inconsistent the last month of the season. He scored single-digit points in 3 of his last 4, and now he gets a matchup against an average Falcons defense. At number 17, we have CJ Stroud, and Stroud wasn't horrible in Week 13. He just couldn't find the end zone. One thing is for sure, though, it's much easier to run on KC than it is to throw on them, and if Houston is going to win this game, it's going to have to come from CJ Stroud's arm. At number 18, we have Tyler Shuck, and Shuck is coming off of his best game of the season. It was the first game all year long where he scored over 18 fantasy points, and now he takes that momentum into a matchup against Tampa, who allows the 3rd most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. At number 19, we have Tua Tagovailoa, and Tua hasn't done much of anything since Week 5, but with the quarterbacks that we have on bye this week, the pickings at this point are pretty slim. Tua at least has a matchup against the Jets, who he threw 2 touchdowns against in Week 4. And at number 20, we have Justin Herbert, and Herbert has struggled for the last month, and his offensive line play is poor at best, and their offense is throwing less than they did to start the season. Now he just had surgery on his non-throwing hand, which could limit him even more, and it's a huge risk even if he plays. All right, so there you go. There's your top 20 in tiers 1, 2, and 3. And we've got a couple of guys on the outside looking in with Tyrod Taylor, Marcus Mariota, Shedeur Sanders, and Cam Ward. And so there's your Week 14 quarterbacks. They're set. Y'all, the playoff push is officially real. Drop your toughest QB call below. Like and subscribe. And come on, let's get a win this week, Headliner Nation.
Analytics off the chain, all the channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game.